Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to cut through the noise and really look at how policy decisions, even the ones aimed at specific goals, can end up having these huge, often hidden costs. Costs across society, the economy, and just individual lives.
Yeah, exactly. And these aren't just, abstract ideas for policy papers. We're going to dig into how these decisions actually affect your daily life, national stability, and, well, the well-being of entire communities. It's about seeing the full picture, the real cost.
And for today's deep dive, we've got a stack of sources. We're looking at detailed reports from research groups, a really current letter from some members of Congress, and other related documents. Our goal, to uncover those surprising ripple effects, the burdens that aren't always obvious.
Right.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with a term that's become, well, incredibly charged lately, diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI. It gets thrown around a lot, often misunderstood, so maybe we should just clarify what each part means. Diversity, that's
Right.
pretty straightforward. It's just about who is in the room, right? Differences like race, gender, disability, different life experiences.
Yeah.
Equity, then that's about fairness.
Mm.
It's recognizing that, some people might need extra support or different resources to really have an equal chance.
Right. Leveling the playing field, essentially.
Exactly. And inclusion, that's about making sure everyone feels like they belong, welcomed, respected for who they are, without having to, change themselves to fit in.
And it's important to remember these aren't brand new ideas, even if the term DEI feels newer. The roots go way back.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Think about the civil rights movement. JFK's executive order back in '61 about equal opportunity in government contracts, affirmative action started there. Then the Civil Rights Act of '64, the Americans with Disabilities Act.
It's a long history.
Decades. And things like collecting data, doing training, that's all been part of trying to address discrimination for a long time.
Right. And you see these ideas woven into so many places. Like in government, it's the biggest employer, so it's about fair hiring, pay, training, but also how services are delivered. Making things accessible physically, or maybe in different languages, online services for people in rural areas, things like that.
Sure.
In education, too. Combating inequality. That goes back to things like Brown v. Board of Education.
Yeah.
It affects admissions, hiring, even what's taught and how it's taught. Plus, support for different students, first-gen, low-income, LGBTQ students. You even see those diversity statements sometimes.
Right, for faculty or admissions. And then in business, it's huge now. Creating inclusive workplaces, making customer experiences better, often through things like training on unconscious bias or microaggressions, or setting up employee resource groups, ERGs, those employee-led groups, and even looking at suppliers trying to support minority-owned businesses. It's really become part of how successful places operate.
What's really striking, though, when you look at the polling data in our sources, is how much public support there actually is for DEI. It feels like there's a disconnect between that and the opposition narrative you hear.
Well, absolutely. A huge disconnect. Look at a 2024 Marist poll. 82% of American adults think U.S. diversity makes the country stronger. That includes 69% of Republicans, 84% of independents.
Wow, 82% overall.
Yeah. And another poll, Washington Post 2024, found 61% see DEI programs as a good thing. Give them a quick description of what DEI is. That jumps to 69%. It shows just explaining it helps.
That really highlights how much the language matters, doesn't it?
Totally. There was a USA Today poll. Only 41% supported teaching critical race theory. But ask about teaching the ongoing effects of slavery and racism, support shoots up to 72%.
72%.
And Republican support went from 15% to 46%, just by changing the words. It shows how buzzwords can really warp perception, even if people agree with the basic idea.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. Moving beyond opinion to, hard data on benefits. What does the research say about how effective DEI actually is?
Well, the evidence is pretty solid. McKinsey looked at over 1,000 companies back in 2020. More diverse companies, more likely to outperform on profits. Simple as that.
Okay.
And a 2024 survey, 400 C-suite execs, 94% said DEI had a positive impact on recruiting, hiring, retention. 74% saw improvements in their company's reputation.
And in schools.
Yeah, and education, too. Studies show things like LGBTQ inclusive curriculum. It leads to less bullying, better attendance, better well-being for queer youth. So these aren't just, nice ideas. They actually work.
But despite that evidence, despite the public support, the sources point to this huge coordinated attack on DEI. Over 440 anti-DEI bills in 42 states just in 2023-24. 23 states passed at least one. It's described as part of a, quote, larger coordinated effort to restrict and control virtually every aspect of daily life.
And you see things like Project 2025 popping up as a big example. It explicitly says its goal is to, quote, delete terms like DEI from every federal rule and regulation if a certain administration takes power.
Delete them entirely.
Yeah. A former Trump official, Russ Vought, was quoted saying they'll have ideas and proposals ready to get rid of DEI. It's a very clear public plan.
And we're seeing these attacks play out right now in specific ways.
Yeah.
In government, for instance, trying to ban public money for DEI programs, rolling back non-discrimination policies.
Right.
A big focus seems to be on banning ESG standards, environmental, social, governance and government contracts, state pension funds. There's even a bill in New Hampshire, HB 1267, that would make violating a ban like that a felony. Up to 20 years in prison.
A felony. Wow.
Yeah. And remember, Trump's 2020 order, it's suspended DEI, censored terms like unconscious bias, limited EEOC investigations, and now there are threats to bring that back even stronger depending on the election.
And in education, well, we saw the Supreme Court decision in June 23 limiting race-conscious admissions. But now there are laws directly banning public funds for DEI offices, staff, programs. Texas cut over 900 university jobs because of this.
Over 100 jobs just in Texas.
Yep. And bans on diversity statements. Kansas called them pledging allegiance to any political ideology. Florida, a political loyalty test.
So it impacts campus life, too.
Oh, definitely. University of Alabama dropped a scholarship program for Latino and Indigenous students. UT Austin canceled a talk by an LGBTQ author because it was labeled DEI training. It just creates this chilling effect. K-12, higher ed, curriculum, faculty, it's widespread.
And businesses aren't immune either. Laws trying to stop private companies from using DEI or ESG, often tying it to getting public funds or contracts.
Right, like Florida's Stop Woke Act in 2022. It tried to ban DEI training in workplaces, got ruled unconstitutional, but then newer bills just shifted focus like to banks or companies with government ties.
And then there's the social backlash, boycotts.
Yeah, Bud Light, Disney, that definitely has an impact. We've seen a drop in DEI roles, staff cuts. A 2023 survey found 24% of businesses stopped or changed training, 12% cut DEI staff.
So there's definitely pressure.
There is, but it's worth noting BEI supporters are fighting back. Civil rights groups, educators, student athletes. You saw the NAACP urging Black athletes to avoid Florida public universities.
Right.
Business leaders, too. Polls actually show most Americans oppose banning corporate DEI training. And despite the politics, many companies are actually doubling down, increasing their commitment, enhancing programs because they see the benefits.
Okay, so we've looked at these broad policy shifts and their systemic costs. But sometimes policy decisions, maybe even ones intended for oversight, can have immediate devastating human costs. Let's pivot to a really recent tragic example. The flash flood in Central Texas, July 4th weekend, 2025.
Yeah, just awful.
The impact was severe. Over 100 deaths, including at least 30 children. They're still searching. And this area, the Guadalupe River Basin, it's known as one of the most dangerous spots for flash floods anyway. Plus, extreme weather is just getting worse.
And what's really concerning, based on this letter from members of Congress to FEMA, is a specific policy decision that seems to have blocked the emergency response.
What was that?
The new DHS Secretary, Kristi Noem, put in a policy that she personally had to approve any FEMA contract or grant over $100,000.
For personal approval for anything over...
Right, over $100,000.
Okay. And how did that play out during the flood? What were the actual consequences on the ground?
Critical delays. The reports say there was a 72-hour delay getting search and rescue teams deployed. Secretary Noem apparently didn't sign off until Monday, July 7th, 3 days after the flooding started.
72 hours.
Yeah, and aerial imagery. Texas officials needed it urgently for the search to map the damage. Also held up, waiting for her approval. People calling FEMA disaster lines faced huge waits because staff couldn't get authorization for extra support to handle the call volume.
That's just a chilling example of how centralized control can lead to immediate tragic delays. What does a policy like that signal more broadly? Especially when you hear about plans to maybe phase out FEMA after hurricane season.
It really raises serious questions about how fragile our emergency systems become when aid gets bottlenecked through one person's approval. It points to maybe a shift towards a more top-down approach that could really undermine crisis management across the country, putting more people at risk down the line.
And speaking of staggering potential costs, let's shift now from that immediate human toll to a huge policy proposal with economic and social effects that could, well, fundamentally reshape the country. Mass deportation. We're hearing renewed calls for it. Some politicians talking about a one-time operation, or maybe deporting 1 million people a year, which, just for context, is double the highest number the U.S. has ever deported in 1 year.
And the number of people we're talking about, it's huge. The estimate is around 11 million undocumented immigrants as of 2022, plus another 2.3 million released from DHS custody more recently. So that's about 13.3 million people total.
13.3 million. So what does trying to remove that many people actually mean for the budget, the economy, and just for the people living here?
Well, the cost to the federal government alone would be astronomical, hundreds of billions, for a one-time operation targeting all 13.3 million. The minimum estimate is over $315 billion.
$315 billion. Minimum.
Minimum, and most of that, over 2/3, is just for arrests and detention. Then tens of billions more for legal processing and actually removing people.
And the logistics of doing that, I mean, how would that even work?
It's almost impossible to imagine practically. Arresting 13.3 million people, you'd need somewhere between 220,000 and 400,000 new government employees and law enforcement officers.
Oh.
Detention. You'd need space for 2 million parents and kids in family facilities, 9 million adults elsewhere, and removals. You'd need almost a 47,500% increase in removal flights per year. Plus, you have countries like Russia, China, Venezuela, India, Mauritania. They restrict or ban U.S. repatriation flights, so it's incredibly complicated.
Okay, what about the other idea? 1 million deportations a year over, say, 10 years.
That's also incredibly expensive. Over 10-11 years, the total cost is estimated near $968 billion, factoring in inflation. That averages about $88 billion per year.
$88 billion a year?
Yeah. And that assumes about 20% leave voluntarily. Each year, you're looking at $7 billion for arrests, needing almost 31,000 new IC employees, which would make IC the biggest federal law enforcement agency. $66 billion a year for detention, needing to build 216 new facilities every single year.
Every year?
Every year. $12.6 billion for legal processing, needing 181 new immigration judges, over 1,100 new tent courtrooms annually, and $2.1 billion for removals, needing a 3,720% increase in flight capacity. The scale is just mind-boggling.
Those are unbelievable government costs, but what about the ripple effects? The hit to the U.S. economy overall?
It would be massive. Basically, it would shrink the U.S. economy significantly. Projections show GDP falling by 4.2% to 6.8%. That's $1.1 trillion to $1.7 trillion lost in 2022 dollars.
How does that compare to, say, a recession?
It's comparable to the Great Recession. GDP shrank 4.3% between 2007 and 2009. So we're talking about economic contraction on that scale.
Wow. Okay, so a major crisis-level event.
Absolutely. You'd lose huge amounts in taxes, nearly $47 billion federal, almost $30 billion state and local from those households, based on 2022 numbers. It would hit Social Security and Medicare hard, losing $22.6 billion and $5.7 billion annually, respectively. That makes solvency a real issue, especially with an aging population. Plus, you lose over $250 billion in consumer spending power.
And the labor market.
Yep.
People often argue removing undocumented workers opens up jobs for Americans. What does the data suggest?
That's a really important point. Undocumented immigrants are mostly working age, almost 90% of them, versus about 61% of the U.S.-born population. They make up about 4.6% of the workforce, 7.5 million people. Removing them would absolutely hammer industries already facing labor shortages.
Like construction, agriculture.
Exactly. Construction relies on 1.5 million undocumented workers. Agriculture, around 225,000. Hospitality, 1 million. And some trades. Over a third of all plasterers, roofers, drywall installers are undocumented.
So the idea that U.S.-born workers just step into those jobs, that's not really how it works.
No, research suggests the opposite, actually. Deporting undocumented workers tends to lead to fewer jobs for U.S.-born workers, not more. An economist, Chloe East, said the economy is not a zero-sum game. Businesses often respond by investing less in low-skill labor, maybe automating or just shrinking. They don't just swap workers. And don't forget, about 1 million undocumented immigrants are entrepreneurs. They generated over $27 billion in business income in 2022. Many run essential local businesses, groceries, restaurants. Removing them disrupts all that, too.
And beyond the dollars and cents, the human impact, particularly on families with mixed status.
It would be devastating. You're talking about potentially separating 4 million mixed status families. That affects 8.5 million U.S. citizens, including 5.1 million children.
5 million American children.
Yes. And those families would see their average household income drop by over 60%, about $51,200 a year. The human cost is just immense. It fractures communities, creates unbelievable hardship for millions of American citizens.
Let's make this even more concrete. There's a case study in the sources. Florida Senate Bill 1718 from 2023.
Ah, yes. Governor DeSantis signed it. It mandated E-Verify for businesses, made transporting undocumented immigrants a felony, banned out-of-state licenses for them.
And what happened?
The fallout was immediate. Undocumented workers started leaving the state, fearing the law. Suddenly, there were huge worker shortages in agriculture, construction, hospitality. You heard business owners saying things like, they're just picking up and leaving.
Right.
The Florida Policy Institute estimated it could cost Florida's economy $12.6 billion in just the first year. And we saw similar things happen after anti-immigrant laws in Georgia, huge crop losses, and Arizona, where economists predicted the state economy could shrink massively.
So, connecting that example back to the larger idea, it seems clear from the data that mass deportation isn't just a policy change. It's something that would fundamentally alter the federal government, trigger a massive economic downturn, and really change the fabric of the country.
Absolutely. It redefines what America looks like and how it functions top to bottom.
So wrapping up this deep dive, it's just undeniably clear, isn't it? Looking at these sources shows the truly staggering and often hidden costs of major policy decisions, whether it's about societal values like DEI or how government operates in a crisis or huge proposals like mass deportation. The ripple effects go so much further than the stated goals.
Yeah, they're all deeply connected. And these aren't abstract issues. They have direct impacts, right, in your communities, across the whole nation. It really pushes us, I think, to look more critically at how policies get debated and rolled out, to really consider the full range of consequences, not just the intended ones.
It leaves you thinking, doesn't it? When we talk about policies to fix national problems, how much attention do we really pay to the full cost? Not just the budget number, but the long-term economic hits, and maybe most importantly, the human toll on families and communities. What does cost truly mean when we make these choices? This deep dive into these sources. Hopefully it's given you some new perspectives to chew on.